No, it's live.
That's good. Facebook, guess what? I don't care about cross-app messaging. I don't want you to take over my life.
You don't want to start texting via Facebook Messenger? Come on, man.
No. I do not. All right. Yeah, I got stuck in your head. This lighting down here is so dreadful. It drives me nuts.
That's okay. You don't look too sick. So Dylan, the other day, he comes home and what was he? He was over here humming. He was like,
The Weatherman.
And so I started singing along with him, and he goes, "You actually know the lyrics to that song?" I was like, "Yeah, I know the lyrics to that song." I said, "Aaron's learned to play it on his ukulele, or he plays it on his ukulele." He's like, "Seriously?" And, on his one of his
really
Spotify,
easy.
Yeah, one of his Spotify playlists that he has with a friend of his. They have some sea shanties. None of them are as good as that one, though.
Nah, because that one's been rewritten.
Yeah. Rewrit. It's been rewrit.
Oh man, the Weatherman come. There it is. Share. Public. Share. Story. Share. I don't really like to share it in groups. I feel like it's a little bit.
No, I shared it on the church page because a lot of people in the church watch it, and that's often where they find it. So
yeah, no, I get that. I meant like I'm in like a couple youth ministry groups, and every once in a while I'll share one if it's I think something very of value.
Yeah,
but I try not to post it in private groups. Kind of like that. I feel like it's a little. Speaking of values, I feel like it's a little overkill. Yeah, a little too much self-promoting there. So I try to chill it.
Let's go.
Try to chill it a little bit.
You know, every once in a while you get into a lesson or, for me, a sermon or a lesson where the most succinct way of saying a point uses some of the most pretentious language.
Right, yeah. Totes my goats, man.
So I had this on Sunday, it was like, frequently, we have to be careful how we confer authority out of habitual deference. And I tried to make that super succinct or, much more clear with more common language.
Right.
But in order to do that, it was like 3 sentences long. It's like, okay. It's like, I really don't want to do this, but here's what we're going to talk about. And now let's break this down. But I can't think of any better way of putting this into words. I felt like I should have put on glasses and maybe worn a sweater vest or something.
Sweater vest.
To say something like that.
I'm a lecture feller today. I can't forget this. I'm going to go play Frisbee golf with one of our teens today at 1:00. And Lauren bought this for my Frisbee golf bag. A nice Bluetooth speaker.
Nice.
So that will be nice. We're going to go play Lake Shawnee because we're going to play in a tournament on Saturday.
Sounds fun.
I'm excited.
Creaky chair.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for beer.
Hey, well, good morning, guys. This is Behind the Beards, and we pull the curtain back, take a look behind the scenes, and try to reveal the things that you need to know about your ministers and your ministry leaders. I am Josh Fowler, preaching minister in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Baton Rouge.
And my partner, Aaron Partlow, is for 1 week more, huh?
One more week. One Wednesday, one Sunday.
In Topeka, Kansas, man.
It's the final countdown.
Oh. So how's it going, man? How's the prep going?
Yeah, it's going. It's really weird. We've had like some of the most chill youth group nights. I don't know how my youth group is handling the transfer, the shift, but I worry about them, and I've been praying for them every day. I know they'll be okay. I know they'll be fine. I know God has a plan, but it's been really weird. And some of the most, it's sad. This is the saddest part is, I love getting invited over for dinner but all these farewell dinners, it makes you go, man, I wish we would have been doing this like over 7 years. I wish we were this busy all the time going over and having dinner with people and all this kind of stuff. So there's kind of this weird feeling of I wish like we would have been doing this a lot more, because the fellowship is great and the relationship building is wonderful. But it's sad that it's like at the end when you're leaving,
Same thing with the house too, right? I mean, you're in a house for however long, and from the moment you get there, there's always things you want to do.
Yeah.
And then it comes time to sell it, and you get the house that you wanted to get when you moved in.
Right.
You're ready to sell it.
Yeah, right, for the next person. Well, not really with this house, because the only thing I did was replace the front porch. And we did get to enjoy that for a little bit.
And when you bought that house there in Topeka, it like had your and Lauren's name on the front door already, I think.
It did.
Like
it was weird.
When you sent me the picture of the house, I was like, of course that's a house they bought. That house was built for them. And
we love that house. We love that house. I'm going to miss that house dearly. I really am. But I'm going to really love the new house we bought in Texas. And I cannot wait to get into it. So it'll be great.
No comment regarding your current.
No comment.
It's hard when you're living in someone else's space. It doesn't matter how much you love them, how close you are with them. You always feel like you're imposing. You always feel like you're in the way.
Gary Souter gave me a quote one time, and I've always remembered it. He's like, yep. House guests are kind of like a dead fish. And they start to smell after a while. And I was like, I definitely feel smelly.
Yeah.
So, but we have one more week. So I do have Wednesday night and Sunday morning, and then we do a goodbye kind of drive-by thing for us, which I'm appreciative of. And then Monday, we have plane tickets, and we're going to fly to Oregon.
Awesome.
So my aunt passed away. And so we're going to attend a memorial for her, graveside memorial, which is really important to me. This was an aunt that very loving. We spent a lot of time together, and I have a lot of fond memories of her. And so I am blessed to be able to go back and to go to that memorial, graveside memorial. And then we'll stay there for about a week. Then we'll fly back here, pack up the rest of the stuff we have in the house, and then we're driving to Texas. So,
well, I guess I'll say awesome that you get to go to Oregon, but not awesome for why you're going back. So,
yeah.
Like, we get to go to Oregon. Awesome for a memorial service. Oh, well,
yeah. Well, I will be. I will be podcasting in Oregon. So,
okay, so you will be representing the Pacific Northwest.
That's right. I will get up
Northwest
at 6 or 10, 9, 8 a.m. Earlier than 8 to get ready for that podcast. I'm sure my dad will wake me up.
I was going to say, do you need me to help you set an alarm? Because
what's that?
You know what 8 a.m. looks like?
Only in the summers for church camp.
When it's not on the backside of a lock-in.
That's right. Yeah, no joke.
Don't forget to see your parents, Aaron. Come on, that's the reason.
I hope I'll see them because they'll be picking me up from the airport.
So yeah, definitely need to see the parents.
Definitely.
Well, man, we're going to talk a little bit about values today and the importance of values. And I think it's important to talk about values both, personally, professionally. We see all kinds of things, mission, value statements, and the importance of having those. So,
Yeah,
talk about
values are important, and it's really interesting to think about like your personal values, and then when you're in ministry, you have to think about like your personal values. You have to think about the collective values of the church, and you have to think about like then if you're a youth minister, you have to think about okay, what's the collective value of the church? What's the collective values of the youth group? How do we find that place? Where do I feel about those? And how do you bring everybody together who may have different values to value the same thing? Did I say values enough?
I think that was valuable.
Thank you. I think it's like, I mean, it's really like taking like all these books and trying to fold them all together and trying to get everything to lay flat and lay perfect. It's kind of a lot like packing. When you are trying to fit everything into one box and you have to take it out and reorganize it and all sorts of stuff like that.
Hey, let's unpack this for a little bit, okay?
Let's unpack this. Pullover park, all of those little minister sayings. And so I don't think sometimes we don't like, we don't think about that. We only think about our values. For example, I had that when I was a fresh green youth minister, we did a nice. I was a little Australian there. We did a nice service project. We went back to the teen room. I had just was like looking through what was in the teen room. I was still new to Central. I pulled out an Xbox that was there, and and then some of the kids started playing Halo. I didn't think about it at all. Like Halo is just Halo, right?
Right.
And it wasn't until like the next day I got an email from one of the parents that was upset because they don't allow their teenagers to play immature rated games. And I thought, okay, yeah, I mean, they weren't playing anything that was mature rated. Well, I didn't realize that Halo had a mature rating. And we're talking about like Halo, like 1, like the original, like the pixelated, like you can't see anything that's going on. And so I had to remember my values are different than this parent's. And when you bring all these kids together, you have all these different values. And so how do you respect everyone's values? Now, it was easy to say, I apologize, and I'm really sorry about that. Also, your child did not tell me that they were not allowed to play this game. If I knew that, I would have stopped it, and we would have played something else. So,
right,
it was just kind of funny.
which kind of comes to a whole another part that we'll talk about. I guess we could talk about it here some. First, don't
put me in a box, Josh. Don't put me in a box.
I know. If we're gonna talk about values, we kind of have to really say what are values. It's because it is a term that we hear a lot, right? Hey, be sure your values. And in business, all companies, they have a mission statement, they have a value statement. I created a mission statement and a value statement when we started at the church. And it was a concept when it came to church work, at least in the context that we're in down here. Like, what do we really need that for? I was like, well, it's important because these are the things that remind us of who we are and who we believe God has called us to be. And so when I think about values, the funny thing, you mentioned think about both of them. When I kind of proposed this episode, I was thinking of in my ministry, what are my values? And so that is my mind altogether. Why is it important to have those? And then when we logged on here and started kind of hashing it out, you're talking about all these personal things. And I'm like, that's not the direction I wanted to go with that at all. However,
welcome to working with Aaron.
Well, yeah, but it's the same though. It's just in a different arena, but they still serve the same purpose. They still have the same importance. Um, and so it's important. It really is important to talk about both of those aspects. But, I'm going to say for me, when someone says, what are values? I'm going to say the values are those guideposts that you lay up, whether it's personally or professionally, the group context, those guideposts that you can look at to determine, am I on mission?
Mm-hmm.
Am I on mission? Which means, am I moving in the direction that I have laid out for my life to go?
Right.
And those values are the things that I can look at and go, okay, we're in line with who God has called me to be, personally, professionally, Christian wise, family wise, those kind of things. So, you have any other take on values, just in general, how we define them, I guess?
I think not how we define them, but maybe how we get them. Sometimes we get our values from our grandparents. Sometimes we either inherit them or we develop them based off of what their values were. And that's very different. Like, you can inherit and it'll be a clone copy, or because your grandparents thought this different way, raised you, you're going to go a drastically different route because, it frustrated you or made you mad or some sort, which, we have seen that society for a little bit, but we're not talking about that. We're getting into something else. So we'll just edit that out. Perfect. Thank you. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, there's different ways that we can, or you can develop and learn. I think there's certain places, there's these critical moments in your life where you develop your values. A lot of times we try to instill values into teenagers and in youth ministry, mainly like value yourself. Value yourself more than society really does value you. Because I think in a sexual content, they say throw yourself out there all over the time, but find your value in God and in purity and in these moments like that, and it's powerful when you see somebody break from the mold of society and say, no, I'm going to value what Christ has put before me. I also think you can draw a lot just right from the word, right? Value, value is something that is important. This is something that is important. This is a golden rule for your life, and that can translate into your ministry. And integrity is a big part of something that is a value, and so I think when you talk about values, you also have to talk about this integrity that goes along. I think a value is a strong arch in your integrity that says, no, I'm not going to break my integrity because of this value. Something that I value is holding this up.
Right.
Kind of an idea. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you asked the question, early on when we were talking about this, about what is that line?
Oh yeah,
that is so easy to cross,
right?
Particularly as ministers, that's so easy to cross in everyday life that you see differently because of the values that you have. And as ministers, our values do have to differ a little bit because of the very public nature of the lives that we lead.
Yeah.
Whether you're a youth minister or a preaching minister, an associate minister, a children's minister, or even a deacon or an
elder. Yeah.
People have a different idea of what your life should look like. So I remember, I'm sitting in, we're at the Santa Fe in Oklahoma City with some buddies from work.
Mm-hmm.
And when my partner walks up, we're watching Monday Night Football. And he says, Joshua, anything you want is on me tonight. And I said, all right, Rob. I said, well, I'm coming. And so, someone asked, he goes, well, do you really think it would have been an issue for you to have a beer at the bar with those guys? It's like, as a regular person, one, probably not. I don't believe that is a sin to be there. However, because of the work that I do for the church, the perception that other people might have, other people might be dealing with other temptations or addiction or sobriety.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be in a place where I put them in a position where they are weakened in their resolve. And so, early on, I felt really self-conscious about that. But I'm going to tell you that those men who had no idea what church was about, they became one of the greatest sources of accountability for me because of, the first few times I chose to make a decision based on the values that I had laid.
Right.
And it was mainly because of the public nature that the rest of my life consisted of. I had to have a different value set in order to prevent my witness from being affected both in the secular world and with my church as well. Work that I was doing there with them. And your TV shows, movies, activities, we just...
Oh man, don't even get us started on like movies and things like that, right? Like who has not been a youth minister and been like, oh no, this movie's great. And then you start watching it with your youth group and you're like, we can't watch this. Like, where did that scene come from? Did he say that? I don't remember him saying that. I think they just added that in on the hard copy disc that I just watched at home. I've been there. I mean, I remember taking our youth group to go see like a Marvel movie in the theater. Right. And the context of me sitting next to one of our other parents who's a big Marvel fan, and they say the GD in it, and I go like, oh no, and it's just that like my value of my youth group is I'm a lot more sensitive to that, same kind of thing. So going back to that same value of alcohol, that's very interesting because I'm with you too. Like alcohol is not a sin, and I don't judge anybody who has wine at dinner or has alcohol in their house or something like that and drinks it recreationally, but doesn't get drunk and all those legit real Christian ways of living, like living a sober life like that. Mm-hmm. But Lauren and I, we made a decision that because we were in youth ministry, because I was a youth minister, that we would never have alcohol in our house. Like we just never would. Right. It doesn't matter, if we drink or anything like that, we would never have it in our personal house because we have teenagers come over. Mm-hmm. And I never want a teenager to open my fridge. I just leave it right there. I never want a teenager to open my fridge, but I never want a teenager to open my fridge, see that I have alcohol and go, oh, well, if Aaron drinks, like I can drink, because they do. They look up to me in some sense. And if I do something, they will do it 10 times more, right? That's one of my favorite things to tell people when they come out to church camp, first-time counselors, is whatever you do, somebody will do it 5 times, 10 times more. If you pull a little prank on somebody, they will pull a prank that is 10 times worse. That is just what teenagers do. That's just how they kind of react in some senses. And so, for me, that was a value, that was a life decision that Lauren and I made. We never, we try not to cross that line ever. And so we don't ever have alcohol in our house. So it's just that's kind of one of those interesting thoughts. Like I have been asked that a couple times. And that's what I'll tell people too.
Well, and you have, so what I see, you just take this podcast, for example, right? I mean, we have 3 core values, encouragement, community, and grace. And it had to be 3 because, 3 is that magic Christian number.
That's right.
If it wasn't 3, it had to be 7, and 7's just a lot.
That's a lot. That's too much.
And our values are, number 1, encouragement will always rule the day. We are never about the business of degrading the church.
Amen. That's like, and I think we made that number 1 because that's that is the most important one for us. In no way ever did we ever want Behind the Beards to be something where we like complain, or as my dad likes to say, the wambulance.
The wambulance.
This podcast was never meant to like reveal the people behind the beards and how hard their job is, and you should praise them and love them because they, slave for. No, it's not about that. It's about, it's about encouragement and encouraging you and encouraging other ministers as well.
And even when, we share stories about times where we
Mm-hmm.
have failed, or even when the church has failed, the objective is always about encouraging people to see things differently, to find a different perspective, and to appreciate how deep and how rich the community of the church is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that community, that second value of community, is one of the most important aspects of God's people.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding the humanity of your minister helps promote true Christian community.
Oh yeah, boy, ooh, tweet that.
Oh yeah, man,
that was a good tweet.
It is a good tweet. And so the ability to understand that we are human, and man, I think about how much better would social media be if we could just truly appreciate the humanity behind the people that we're speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
And then understand that we've been shown grace by God. And in all things, we're going to be gracious, even when we talk about our shortcomings.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so you think about those. So when we get into some of these conversations, when it's really easy to get off in the weeds, I have to ask myself regularly, is it about encouragement? Is it about community? Is it about grace?
Right.
If it falls in line with those three, then we'll go for it. If it doesn't fall in line with those three, then that's a story that I need to save for another time. Well, in another place.
And that grace aspect is so important. And I think we wanted to add that and keep that as one of our values, because I think one of our biggest points for Behind the Beards is you need grace, right? And your preacher tells you every week that you need grace and you need mercy. Yeah. And what we're trying to do Behind the Beards is to remind you that they need grace and they need mercy. That they are human and flawed, and that's like the biggest part. I mean, that's why you say it every week when we start the podcast, is that your minister is human and I'm human. Like, I need grace and I need mercy. And when you wrong me, I pray that I show you grace and mercy. And I hope that if I wrong you, that in turn you will show grace and mercy. Matter of fact, some of my biggest teaching moments in youth ministry here at Central was when I said or did something without intent of hurting somebody, but it hurt their feelings.
Right.
And then they came to me, and they came to me like with a pitchfork, like, you're the worst. And instead of going, oh yeah, and like getting all big, instead what I do is I fall on my knees and I ask for forgiveness. Even if I don't feel like if they're just taking it out of context or just being really sensitive, instead of saying, well, I say, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. That was not my intent. And I hope that you can forgive me. Let me buy you lunch. Let's talk about it. But know that I apologize and sorry. And every time that I've done that relationship between me and that teenager, 10 times stronger, 10 times better. They come to me. They have more questions. We're more friendly. There's more grace and there's more mercy and everything like that. And that's a value of mine. Yeah, I'll circle around. That's a value to mine, to always ask for forgiveness. It is easier sometimes to just apologize and build that relationship and move forward than it is to fall on your own sword than it is to fight it.
Yeah. And, I think
that's a big pill I have to swallow a lot.
I know. I fell victim to the reply all. And thankfully, I mean, I wasn't ugly, I wasn't derogatory, but I shared some information that had I had known it was going to the entire congregation, I would have shared it much more tactfully instead of just being blunt. I thought I was only replying to my elders who were in this group, but one of them had responded in a thread and just CC'd some people. And so when I hit reply all, it replied to the whole congregational email. And it was an answer to one of their questions, but I was like, oh, man. And as he replied back and said, Josh, did you mean for that to go to the whole church? I was like, no.
No.
What did I write? What did I type? How did I say that? I'm like, oh no, and so immediately I have to go, to that person and say, I meant no offense.
Right.
If I hope and pray you didn't take it that way, because one of our values is community, and the last thing in the world I want to do as a minister, as a person, as a Christian, and definitely not as a preacher, is to be someone that makes that community feel less welcoming for anyone that comes in those doors, or makes that call. So, they guide us. One of the things I don't think we're very good at personally is recognizing and acknowledging our personal values. I think we know that we have values, and I think that we would say, yeah, I have Christian values, but to actually name them, what are the things that are going to drive you as a person, as a human, as a Christian, as a father, as a brother? I think we just like to kind of throw out that general thing out there. We're pretty good at naming it in business. We're getting better about naming them when it comes to churches and ministries. But individually, I kind of looked. I was like, what would be my core values as a person?
Yeah.
And we're getting ready to do this podcast, and I couldn't immediately come up with them.
Uh-oh.
And so I think as people, we need to have these things in mind about what is it, who is God calling me to be in my family, in my church, in my job, in my community, and have those, 3 or 4 core foundational things that are going to guide me, because we have to have them, and we've got to know that they're there, because if they're just general, we can kind of schmooze around them,
So have you ever been in a spot where like your values like conflict?
Oh yeah.
Like where your value and like the group or the Christian or not the Christian, but like the church value or the group that you're with value is different?
Just any group that I'm with, or the church group that I'm with?
Yeah.
You said, yeah. I said any group or a church group.
Just any group. Sorry, I was reading comments here. I was reading comments. I just meant like, have you ever like had a moment where like your personal value was different than like the group's value? That was probably a left hook kind of a question. It
is different a lot, and just because it's different doesn't mean it's necessarily bad or wrong, right? I mean, you can have 2 very positive and good sets of values. It's just a different path of getting to the end goal. Mm-hmm. If you're in Franklin, Tennessee, your call to life in that community is going to be much different than if you're living life in East Baton Rouge or in Honduras or in Canada, or wherever it is. So I think we frequently find ourselves in places where our values are different, that we are just on different paths. Ultimately, that's why, we ended up leaving Kansas City. It wasn't because they were doing anything wrong or I had done anything wrong. I just believe God was calling me to do something in ministry that didn't line up with the path that they wanted to travel, and felt like God was calling their church to travel. And, we try to work in and to work around those things, but it just, it didn't feel authentic for me to continue to serve. And I felt like I was wasting their time, knowing that they wanted to go down a path that I just wasn't built to travel. It wasn't my personality. It wasn't my calling, and I didn't feel passionate about it. And we're doing well down here. And look, that church, they brought some people in to build on the groundwork that we laid. And they've planted a church that's grown to 300. They have just completely blossomed in that community.
Sure.
Because they got someone in there whose values fit with theirs. And we found a church down here who needed exactly what we had been trained to do. And we've seen some beautiful things develop while we were here, because we found that place where those values are in line.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, we can find our places in the world where, our values are completely different. But we have to know what it is that we're really called to do. My dad asked this question about if if it's inappropriate to do in home, is it also inappropriate to do in public? And I think that's a decision that we have to make, right? For ourselves. It's a line that we're all called to walk. My values are consistent, no matter where I am. That's the thing about values is it helps you make decisions. How do your values help you decide what you're going to do? I'll ask you that question. Let you answer it for a minute while I take a breath. I've been talking too much.
No, that's okay. Well, it's an interesting conversation for sure to have. And it's one of those conversations that, like, man, I feel like it is a slippery slope, but I also feel like it is definitely a place where you have to think context, you have to think ministry, you have to think. There's so many passages that you have to think about. You have to think about, like, the places in which Jesus went to do ministry. You have to think about, of course, like Jesus's first miracle that he ever performed. You have to, think, like, well, if Jesus went to these places in ministry, and if you know cultural context, did he participate? Probably, yeah. I mean, I would say it would be pretty fair to say yes, considering that, the fruit of the vine was wine, and it was, and so for me, so let me clarify. So let's take that topic and I'll throw that over there, and let's bring back in this topic for me, for my values. My personal values is I could probably count on my hands the amount of times that I may consume alcohol within a year. It's super low. It might be a lot of times. It's when if I do it, it would be if I'm out of state, or something like that. But that's because that is because it's tied to that value of one. I don't need that kind of heat from any of my teenagers or from any of my church members as well. Anything that's kind of detrimental to that party. I want to be a light and be an encouragement, even though this is something that I don't consider to be wrong. It would be along the same lines of, why do I not wear Bermuda shorts to church on Sunday morning? I probably go as far as thinking that if you're wearing your Sunday bests on Sunday mornings, okay, this is where we might lose some members here. I'm sorry, or viewers, that I actually feel like wearing your Sunday best on Sunday morning is a sin, or is pretty close to it, because almost every occasion where Jesus gives an example, you've always got this really well-dressed person who's coming before God, and he always says, boy, this person is terrible. This person who is really poorly dressed and is more concerned about the content of their heart coming before God and worshiping, this is the right person.
But we're not having that argument, right?
We're not having that argument.
Yeah.
That's not here.
You're saying
but I'm saying if, so for me, it's the same thing like that. Like, this is my tie-in. Why do I not wear then Bermuda shorts and, and go out full cash when I go to church on Sunday morning? Well, because there's one passage that stops me from doing a lot of that kind of stuff. If it causes your brother to stumble, right? Oh man, that is like the ultimate, like, not rain on your parade. That's the wrong motive and idea, but that is such a powerful passage to say, hey, guess what, Josh? It's not all about you. It's not all about
somebody else
me.
for a change. Okay.
I know. Well, you're the only, all right, Alan Middleton. It's not all about you. It's not all about me. And so I make sure that I prepared my heart and my mind for worship to come before God. And I will wear an acceptable in all eyes an outfit to church on Sunday morning. That's acceptable to me. That keeps me comfortable and not worrying about my outfit and what I look like, but also Mr. So-and-so who sits on the far side, who all he would focus on church instead of Josh's powerful and strong lesson from God's word is going, why is our youth minister wearing Bermuda shorts on Sunday morning? And so
I think the important aspect of particularly this question is about what's appropriate. What does Paul say? Paul says everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. And so just because something isn't wrong doesn't mean that it's not inappropriate. And that can be different setting and for your time and for your context and for the place. But ultimately, it comes down to my values. And I think our values help us with decision making because, what do they say? If you want to be good at doing something in the dark, you've got to practice it in the light. And so if you can plan ahead of time, about how you're going to decide when the decision-making opportunities come, then it is much more easy to make the right decision in the moment when you aren't trying to figure out what's the right choice. And so if I know, you have the little deal like what they say, think before you speak. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it needed? And is it kind? I think that's the way those things work out. Sounds good. So before I speak, is this encouraging? Is this uplifting? Is it building up? Or am I tearing someone down? But I have to know ahead of time that that's the value that I'm going to live with. So if I set those values out for myself, then when it comes time to make a decision, I can look and I can say, okay, here's my guideposts. Does this decision I'm about to make keep me on path with who God has asked me to be as his follower? And if it does, then we can go with it and we'll continue to move towards who I'm supposed to be as a Christian. That's true with a group. That's true with a church. That's true with a business. It's also true with us as individuals. And it is so important for us to be aware of those values so that we aren't just left to the whim of the moment to decide, am I going to make a decision that is in keeping with God's word and God's command?
Yeah.
Or am I going to kind of fall prey to the moment and find myself later going, that wasn't a terrible decision, but I could have done that better.
Right.
Those values help us in the moment to determine what is right.
Right. And I was trying to pull us out of touchy kind of subjects, because that wasn't the point of today's episode. The point was just that line that we have to draw in our personal values and our ministry values, and things like that. Like they're, I know of some youth ministers who, or ministers in general, like they might enjoy and watch a TV show, but it wouldn't be one that you would say from the pulpit that you watched. You wouldn't be like, hey, I watched this last night. You should watch it too. Well, wasn't that a show about murder? Isn't that like a 10 Commandment?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and even some of the podcasts that I listen to, they're true crime podcasts. They are often about open, unsolved cases. They're trying to bring awareness to cold cases that haven't been solved and kind of go with this hive mind of exploring things. And maybe they've solved some from some of their listeners who have heard an episode, remembered something, saw something, found something. And some of those cases have actually been solved through some of this. However, some of them don't have, some of the episodes and some of the podcasts don't have the cleanest language.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so even sometimes just mentioning a podcast like that, because of, how it affects other people.
That's such a good point. That's exactly what
you don't want someone else popping in there and going, dude, I listened to this podcast with my kids and you didn't tell me. And I was like, I know.
I know.
I'm so you just kind of, you have to be really careful about those kind of things that you are doing, actively participating in, and how you share.
You know what the worst is? The worst is when you watch a movie on TV. You know what I'm talking about? You watch a movie on TV and they've cut and edited it and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, oh, that was such a good movie. Let's watch it with the youth group. And then it's like, what is this trash?
So let me share funny story, and then we probably need to come up with
the
a
holiday movies. Like, what are the holiday movies with what's his name?
Chevy Chase.
Yes, like I never knew how dirty those movies are because I'd only ever seen the TV version of the movies.
Yeah, my dad had a dubbed version that he had recorded on a VHS that he had taken out some of the racier scenes, and then I showed them to my kids. And I was like, "Oh,
yeah, I know." Yes, nobody wants to be in those moments where you go. Like we watched Monty Python in Search of the Holy Grail, and I totally forgot about there is a scene that is like super inappropriate with a knight in a castle trapped with maidens.
Right.
And I was like, oh, let's fast forward through this.
So when our kids were young, we had Radio Disney on XM radio.
Mm-hmm.
And Radio Disney had all of the popular songs, but they were cleaner than the radio edits.
Right.
They were super clean. And I get in the van one time, and there is a Black Eyed Peas CD in the console. And I asked Heather, I said, whose CD is this? And she goes, oh, it's mine. I bought it for the kids. Like, you bought it for the kids? She goes, yes, that has all the songs that we listen to. And I was like, you listen on Radio Disney? And she goes, yeah, but this is the CD. And it's like, yeah, but you see this little red E that's next to this? Right. This means explicit lyrics.
Not E for version, everyone.
Not E for everyone. That's right. The version you hear on Radio Disney is not the version that they have on this CD. And so on that whole CD, there were, I think, 13 songs. There was only one song. And it wasn't even clean. It just didn't have it. You know, this is my wife, right? And she's very naive and trusting, and she doesn't even think about those things. They don't cross her mind, right? Because she just doesn't work that way. And she's like, oh my goodness, I just wasted like $25 on this CD. This is, you know, back when CDs were expensive.
No joke. Who paid for music?
And I know.
There's the value right there. Do you download software illegally?
No. So
that's what I wanted to talk about today, but you talked the entire time.
Yeah, my bad. So I'll give it to you. You got a behind the beards moment, and we can sign off. We're a little long here.
Well, I like that was like that's one of the things. Like, okay, so like this is not a behind the beards moment, but this was a life-changing moment with Aaron. So like back when like Webster, was it Webster? What was I don't know what it was, but like we had a big come to Jesus moment, right? I love those come to Jesus moments. When I was a wee little boy at Camp Yamhill, Napster. That's it. Yeah, not Webster. That's a dictionary. But Napster. Yeah. So we had this this giant youth rally out at a church camp, and like it was the whole week was focused on like confessing your sins and being true to who God wants you to be. And like on the last night, like usually when there's like some kids who come forward and they want to make like a confession in front of the group and all that kind of stuff, no kids came forward. There was like these staff, these guys that I looked up to forever came forward and said, guys, I have a legal copy of Photoshop and Adobe on my computer, and I use it all the time, and I didn't pay for it. And I have all of this music that I downloaded through Napster. And that's a sin. I mean, that is stealing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go home and I'm going to delete it all and I'm going to repent and I'm going to ask for forgiveness. And then I'm going to purchase everything. It's going to cost me. I'm not going to be able to get it all back right away. 'Cause it's going to cost me thousands of dollars to get everything back. But it needs to be done the right way. And for me, that was like one of those biggest moments for me. Of like, and you remember when I talked about like integrity, and then there's like this value rib that goes through it, and that was one of those things, you know. I will never fill up a water cup with Sprite because that breaks one of my values, and I feel like that's an integrity thing.
Right.
I will never, I don't use pirated software.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play pirated games. I had to have a really long conversation with one of our teenagers one time about pirated video games. He was like, well, why would I pay for it? I could just get it for free. And we had to talk about integrity, and we had to talk about values, and we had to talk about, those kind of things. And, as Chris, John Chris says, sometimes you just got to check your heart.
Yeah. And the real question is, like, what's your integrity worth, right? We had a guy that had, we have a kid, one of the kid's friends, who's, he spends a lot of time with us, and is a good young man, but like most kids, they don't really think of things. And we went to Chipotle, and we got dinner, and he said, like you said, I'll have water. And so he came and he sat down, and it wasn't white, it was red. It wasn't Sprite, it was red
not even
soda.
Sprite.
Not even Sprite. And I was like, dude, like, what are you doing? And he goes, I just got me a cold drink. I'm like, we didn't buy a cold drink. We bought water. Water is also cold. He goes, you know what I mean? It's like, I do know what you mean. It's like, go buy a Coke. And he's like, what for? And I'm like, because it's $2.95.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, but this is free. I'm like, it's not free. It's going to cost you something.
Right.
He's like, what do you mean? It's like, it like you said, it'll cost you your integrity.
That's right.
And I said, man, we'll call him John. I said, John, what's your integrity worth? Are you really willing to sell your integrity for a $3 cup of Coke? So I'm not. And I'm not willing to sell your integrity for it either. So go buy a Coke, and then you get all you want. And it's a bigger cup, and you can take it with you. But it's just one of those things that's so easy to overlook. You asked that question earlier. What's the line that's so easy to cross?
Right.
And those are some of those that are that way.
We were at a restaurant one time, and the same thing. Like they had glasses with their names on it. When we were sitting around with a bunch of people who were not Christians, and one of the ladies took the napkin and wiped out her glass. She's like, "This is so cool." Put it in her purse, and Lauren and I are like,
"What just happened?
What just happened?" And so we leave, and everyone leaves, and I say, "Hey, I'd like to purchase one of your glasses." And they said, "Okay, it's only like $13." And I said, "Okay, here's $13." And they hand me the glass. I said, "Okay, now I don't want to make a scene, but one of the ladies or one of the people, I didn't even say their gender. I said one of the people, and I explained the situation. They said, "That's thank you very much." I said, "That's okay. I didn't want you guys to be out of glass." I said, "So you can just put that one in your rotation." Because it was the same glass, for like $13, and it was a cool glass. So it was just kind of interesting. Those values, and things that we do value. And I guess our behind the beard moment is this. It's good to have your personal values. It's also good for you as a church member to be plugged into what are your church values? What is your church value? And how does that, obtain to you? How do you walk in line with that? What is your youth group values? If you're a parent of a teenager, what is your youth group values? It's good to know these things, and to know what's best for your youth group. So we want to thank you guys for being here today. We also want to remind you of Galatians 6:9. I know we're in a pandemic. I know pandemic was so last year, but trends kind of like to stick around. So make this your trend. Don't grow weary in doing good. Do something good in God's name, because this world is messy and life is messy. So do something different. Change the world. Do something that Christ would do. I'm Aaron, and this is Josh, and we will see you next week on Behind the Beards.
Till we're all growing a beard. A man's face should never be bare. We just want some facial hair. We're anticipating, yeah, everyone's waiting for a beard.